I wanted to actually talk about a story you wrote earlier this week, which you can read on the Toronto Star. Too much of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl might be a bad thing for the Edmonton Oilers. Why did you write that? And did last night, well, we're doing this on Thursday, so we're referencing the Edmonton Oilers loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday night. Did that game ultimately prove your point from the headline?
Well, it wasn't a full proof, right? Because Connor McDavid entered COVID protocol and wasn't in the game. But Leon Draisaitl did play nearly 25 minutes in the game. Mm-hmm. And, I know we're going to talk about Cale Makar later. I mean, Cale Makar is having his fantastic season as a defenseman. And I know what makes him special, he's such a great skater, and he does roam in areas that a defenseman typically doesn't. But Cale Makar is averaging 24 minutes a game this season. So my point is, Leon Draisaitl as a forward, as a center, someone who covers the entire ice, who kills penalties, who's playing in every game state, is playing more than a defenseman in a lot of cases. And look, I have to be clear, because I think there's the problem with headlines or someone who maybe reads a snapshot of that story. I think it's easy to misunderstand the point. The point, first of all, is not to lay any blame at those players' skates, like whatsoever. It's not critical of their performance in the least. I think the point I was trying to make is that it says bad things about their organization that for the last 6 seasons, essentially that's been the case. I mean, there's a couple exceptions along the way, but essentially those two have been at the top of forward ice time for 6 straight years. And look at all they've done during that time is fill their trophy cabinets. Like they're winning Rocket Richards in Draisaitl's case, or, Hearts and scoring titles, outright trophies for Connor McDavid. Like those guys are doing with those minutes what you'd want. But I do think there's a diminishing return to, you're getting the points from them, but what are we still talking about for that team to break through and have playoff success? And so, the reason I wrote the story is there's some talk behind the scenes about that one of the problems in Edmonton isn't that those players are underperforming, but it's that they don't have enough guys lower down in the lineup to maybe just take some of the burden off them. When it gets to a must-win game, absolutely play the wheels off them. But you want them to be fresh, or as fresh as can be when you get there. And we're still only low 30, there's 40 odd games left in the season. Mm-hmm. The Oilers are leaking oil everywhere. And those players in this stretch where they've won 2 of 13 games, if you look at it, they're still performing like guys who will win a scoring title, but they're not as crazy as it was before that point. And again, I'm not blaming them, but it just shows how much is being asked of them for the Oilers to have success. I think it's really a criticism of the organization that they haven't found a way to be able to win games, when those guys maybe are scaled back a bit. And, it's easy to make a comparison to the Leafs because the Leafs have some high-end players. They played them in that game. Toronto's playing Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner about 2 minutes less a night, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot over how often games are played. And the Leafs have won some games recently, even games where they scored a lot of goals, where Austin Matthews didn't score or Marner had 1 assist. It's not, their entire operation hasn't been reliant on, those guys win them a ton of games, don't get me wrong, but
for sure
they have more down the lineup where they can spread things around deeper. And I think that's where Edmonton has to get to, and quick. I don't think they can do it this season, but the other side of Edmonton's story, and it would be unfair to go this deep on it and not point it out. They've had horrendous injury luck, which happens. They've had bad COVID luck, I would say, in the sense that it seems like they have 3 players on the COVID list at any one time, but they've never had it, and again, I'm not being crass about this, but if everyone on their team is going to get it, which it kind of seems like, you'd rather almost have it all at once, because then you get shut down and then you return basically where everyone can play. They're missing 3 and 4 guys every week, but then it's a different 3 or 4 guys the next week. And so they're forever playing shorthanded because of COVID. Whereas a team like Toronto has, I think, 21 or 22 members of their traveling party / players all get it in a week window. They never had to play a game with all those guys out. And now they don't get tested for 90 days. They're on a good end of the competitive end, whereas, all of a sudden it's Derek Ryan and Connor McDavid, 2 of their 4 centers, and Tyson Barrie, one of their top defensemen out, for the game on Wednesday. And so anyway, they've had some bad luck in there. They're not getting enough saves. I mean, it's actually crazy. So I'm not saying this is the only problem for Edmonton. I'm not saying this is why they've gone into this tail slide, but I think it's an interesting way to look at their season that, I think they need to get to a point organizationally where they lean on those guys a little less during the year, try to save them for the end of the season as much as possible, and try to build a deeper team. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, teams like Tampa had all kinds of weapons, right? But their third line in those last two cups was undeniably a huge factor in that, with Coleman, Goodrow, and Gord. And so Edmonton, I mean, I'm not saying you can mimic that exact third line, but you need a third line. And I just feel like part of the reason Edmonton hasn't had it is because of these injuries, so they haven't had the full complement of forwards. But I think they also need to do a better job of building their team out. And because you get in these moments, and so much is being asked of Draisaitl and McDavid, like they have to be tired. They have to be feeling a different degree of pressure. I mean, pressure's on every athlete in the sport, but
of course
they understand, like, if they're not getting 2 points each night, like the team isn't winning. It's just, it's almost a fact. Like you look at the start of the year, like Edmonton was insane. They never lost, but those guys were literally averaging 2 points a game. And now they're averaging like 1 or 0.9 or whatever during this run. And it's just not enough. And the crazy thing about their stretch where they've been losing all this, they're not getting blown out. They're not losing games 7-1. Like that's the flip side of this not maybe being a full panic situation. Like they're losing in the margins. And I think that's tough on those guys. And, I don't even put this on Dave Tippett. Like, I think if you're in Dave Tippett's shoes and you look down your bench, yeah, you're throwing 97 and 29 on the ice, like absolutely every minute you can, because that's probably better than the next options in your mind. But if you're Dave Tippett, are you going at Mikko Koskinen, which is actually a good segue to the next point I wanted to get at. He's been in the news, obviously, with what he's been saying about Mikko Koskinen after the Monday night game against the Rangers, where he said he had some bad goaltending and mentioned the brutal mistake where he mishandled the puck. 10 the goal, Dangle would say, so many people would say, he did not do that, and it resulted in a goal against. What do you think of the fact that he's put himself out there with the comments on Mikko Koskinen and the back and forth that's ensued since? I'm split on this one, Julian, because I love honesty. And, what he said, other than we all blow it up for 2 days, it's not untrue. Like literally they have a good start in a game they need to win at Madison Square Garden, and the goalie coughs up a goal right away. And this is a team, I think it was 20 of 24 games they've given up the first goal. Like they feel like they're down 1-0 before the opening faceoff, this team. And then all of a sudden they're down 1-0 after a good 5 minutes or whatever it was in that game. And so I want to praise the honesty and I love that, but it does only add fire to a very volatile situation, right? Because then the next day, then they fly to Toronto. The next day of practice, he's asked about it. Then Mikko Koskinen does an interview with Tommy Seppala in Finland and said it's not nice to be, have the bus backed over you, and they've only scored 7 goals in my last 6 losses, and I can't score goals. So now it looks like Koskinen's calling out his teammates. I'm not sure that was his intent, but I think he's probably trying to provide more nuance or facts around what's gone on. Then Dave Tippett, I actually asked him before Wednesday's game at the morning skate about, Koskinen's comments. And then he's like, well, it's taken out of context. It becomes this whole thing that at a time when you so badly need to win, when the best player on the planet goes into COVID protocol, your team is friggin' reeling. And I just think it becomes an unnecessary distraction, but I don't want to hammer them too much because, man, I'm in there asking those questions just like you. I want real answers. Yeah. I mean, that's better than all the times we get lied to, which is frequent in this job. Although I said last time anyway, but there's maybe not outright lies, but there's a lot of misdirection or whatever.
Small side note here, not to break you off here. Just want to clarify something. So were you the one who actually asked the question that led to Dave Tippett saying the quotes were taken out of context?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was your voice. Cause I listened back to that audio and I'm like, I wonder if that's CJ. Anyway, go ahead. My bad. Yeah. Sorry. I just want to clarify that.
Well, I'll even tell you how the sausage was made there. I was at the morning skate, of course, before the Leafs Oilers game. And, because there's no traveling media, because the Koskinen story in Finland came out about an hour before the morning skate, give or take.
Right.
That's what it came online. And so, it was pretty juicy quote from Mikko Koskinen in there. And no traveling media from Edmonton. And obviously the Toronto media is largely focused on what's going on with the Maple Leafs. There was some concern maybe that no one would pick up on that from the Edmonton angle and ask what would be an obvious question if there were Oilers media around. And so TSN, someone at TSN gave me a call and said, make sure that gets asked. So, I mean, I was comfortable doing that, of course. I mean, it's a fair question on that day. So I made sure it got asked. And yeah, he basically said, I feel like my quote was taken out of context. I was asked by the reporter about the start of that game in New York. I said it was a bad play or whatever the exact quote was. And he said Koskinen actually made some good saves down the stretch. And like, you know, he's trying to smooth it out at that point. And I'm sure the damage was done. You know, the Oilers only now play one game in 14 days. I don't know if you realize that.
I did not realize that.
They got one game against Ottawa for the next 2 weeks. I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't have any info on this, but maybe something gets rescheduled because they're a team that's had a number of games postponed. So maybe they end up playing more than that. But as of right now, they're playing 1 in 14. So, you know, there's no goalie controversy because, I mean, Koskinen probably isn't starting that game, assuming Mike Smith's healthy. And then, you know, we're going to be into February before there's even a start. So maybe at least now there's time for things to settle. The downside of that, Edmonton has no opportunities to pick up points for 14 days, essentially. And so they're almost certainly going to be out of a playoff spot by the time we get into February. And then they're really going to be chasing it. It's a fascinating situation. Like, this is the most urgent situation in the league right now, because that is a team that can't miss the playoffs. I still don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, honestly, but like, you know, I think sometimes we're too quick to panic. This is like where you like take the glass case off and you are smashing that panic button. If you're like they got to make a trade, they got to do something. I mean, I think that you can't just be like, this is going to sort itself out. I mean, they tried to do that. I respect it. Again, like, they lost 2 of the games on this 5-game road trip after Christmas, you know, in extra time, essentially. So they got a loser point, but like, they could have obviously won those games. Like, even the Toronto games, 2-2 in the third period, they lose 4-2 with an empty net goal and a power play goal against. Like, they're close. It's not like they're being embarrassed. And that was a game they played without McDavid and all this stuff, but you got to get some wins or else. Dun, dun, dun.
What can the Oilers do, though? Like, I mean, they don't have that much in terms of cap space. I know we've brought up the fact that there are goalies out there for them to get. We've mentioned the defense that needs some help as well, and there are options there too. I'm just curious what Ken Holland can actually do with the situation at hand. Like, what do you think he'd have to do in order to improve his team?
Well, you know, Marc-Andre Fleury, we've talked about him to Edmonton a long time. Like, I think there could be some nervousness on the Oilers' end of things with him, just because he's an older goalie, as Mike Smith is, just about having, you know, just some of that unpredictability about that. You know, I don't know for sure that Marc-Andre Fleury, who has a no-move clause, would waive his no-move to go to Edmonton, maybe especially among these circumstances. Maybe Adam Wilde can ask the agent provocateur at some point.
L'agent provocateur!
Although I'm guessing that Alan doesn't want to share his client's private business on his podcast.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
But, you know, I think that he's sort of the most obvious candidate here. Like, because how many good goaltenders or great goaltenders would ever be traded at this point in the season? Like, there's just not very many. There's lots of great goaltenders around the league. Those teams aren't trading them, even for a haul. You know, I think getting a goaltender, like stabilizing that position, would be a big first step. And that's not to place all the losing on the goalie, but I feel like that's where a situation where you could make one move that makes a tangible difference, like immediately. You know, they're also looking for a third line center. I don't know who that player is. I'm not sure that player is coming through the door in 2 weeks, but even if they get that guy in a trade next week, just for argument's sake, I don't know that I think over time, that's a move that will pay off, but I'm not sure that pays off in terms of winning games right now, reversing the slide. And so I think if there's something that can be done in net, that's where you start. And then, of course, the other button that we touched on is do you fire the coach? I mean, that's the other one move you could make that might have a tangible change in the mood around the team or deployment or what have you. But beyond that, man, I mean, you're just hoping. You just hope the guys figure it out. I mean, maybe only having one game in 14 days could be a good thing.
That's true.